Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I believe we're talking about health and issues concerning health, and I've been asked to talk about Buddhism, and I can think of nothing better to talk about in terms of health, because the main focus of Buddhism is the Four Noble Truths. And the first truth is that life is suffering. And the second is there's a cause of suffering. The third is there's an end to suffering. And the fourth is there's a path. And by suffering, that's not a nihilistic, negative, pessimistic view. It just means most people aren't in a state of joy 24/7. Therefore, the Buddhists would say they're suffering, because there is a way to be happy and healthy 24/7 and not suffer. The second noble truth, the cause of suffering is always us. It's our thinking. It's the way that we're viewing the world. We're projecting onto the world all our stuff all the time. And it often causes us suffering, the way we see other people and interpret things. And the third noble truth is the end of suffering. That is simply to change our thinking and to begin to understand the Maya or illusion that we're projecting out there. You know, how we see somebody in the hall. I teach school. I hear kids say all the time, you know, so-and-so hates me. Well, why do you think that? Well, I saw them in the hall and they didn't speak. Well, they were probably preoccupied, listening to something on their headsets or looking the other way. Had nothing to do with their hating the person who thinks that he or she's being hated. It's that person's projection, and they suffer. And the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path, which is right understanding, right aim, right livelihood, all the rights that help us live a healthy, good life. So basically, in Buddhism, Buddhism is considered by most people I've studied with to be psychology in Western terms. It's not a religion. It is not a philosophy. It's a path. And that path is basically good psychology. It's how do we think so that we don't suffer. And so the entire Buddhist path is about getting out of suffering, and suffering, it comes in many forms. If we don't handle our suffering, we have a lot of anxiety. Our world, especially in the West right now, we're full of anxiety. I think a psychiatrist recently said it was at least 25% of the population is suffering from anxiety. And she showed us a chart of the human body, and she said this is how the suffering manifests: eczema on the skin, headaches, stomach aches, back pain, all these different physical manifestations, but they all come from anxiety. And basically what the Buddhists would call suffering, things that cause us to suffer, the way we're seeing the world that is causing us so much anxiety and fear and all kinds of suffering. So it's very interesting, because the most important part of Buddhism, for any of the levels or sects of Buddhism, it's always the Four Noble Truths. That's the first thing that Gautama Buddha taught when he got enlightened under the Bodhi tree. He went out and taught the Four Noble Truths, and that's the heart of it all. And it seems like that is the heart of most modern psychology. And it certainly has a lot to do with health these days, because the way we think, I think people realize that now. Our thinking causes disease. It causes all kinds of suffering, not just mental, but the mental suffering manifests physically. So my view is the more you study the Four Noble Truths, and really the more we work on ourselves and try to alleviate that suffering, which is what the whole Buddhist path is about, is how to alleviate that suffering and change our thinking so that we are calm and peaceful, compassionate, loving people. Those kinds of people don't have near the physical ailments that those who are suffering have, suffering mentally. And so there it is in a nutshell.